The city of Ashbourne, with its hustle and bustle of industry, always left Elias and Nathan incredibly tired. As migrants, their days were spent surrounded by the hum of factory machinery and a monotonous routine. Amidst this fatigue, a crazy idea struck them: climbing a mountain. For Elias, this was a first-time experience. He had only seen the beauty of mountain peaks on his phone screen, showing clouds drifting beautifully. Then, let's climb a mountain. Let's get some fresh air, Elias suggested to Nathan. The impromptu plan finally took off. They didn't go alone. Caleb, a senior at the office, and Lucien, a seasoned climber with experience climbing many peaks, joined them. However, from the start, the universe seemed to be giving them a sign. The journey, which should have begun peacefully, instead began with a series of strange events. They set off at exactly midnight, after Elias and Nathan got off their night shift. Still rested, they sped toward Gravespire Mountain. However, Google Maps, usually accurate, suddenly went awry. In the Gravesend area, they got lost in a quiet, dark residential area. It was 2 a.m., but they seemed to be circling around the same place. This navigation error forced them to arrive at Gravespire Base Camp later than planned. As they gazed at the summit of Gravespire Mountain from a distance, Elias felt a sense of euphoria and a strange, inexplicable thrill. "This is the mountain we're going to climb," he thought. Little did he know, the mountain had prepared a welcome that would change his life forever. The climb began with laughter and enthusiasm. Elias, the most enthusiastic, even managed to overtake Lucien. However, on the Blue Lake Trail, his first vision occurred. He saw a black figure, which he thought was Lucien, turning onto a steep left path. When he called out, Lucien was far behind him. It was the first warning, but Elias chose to dismiss it as a fatigue-induced hallucination. At 4 p.m., they arrived at the first post to set up camp. This is where the atmosphere began to take a metaphysically dark turn. As Elias was fetching water from a pipe fountain near an old, seemingly abandoned building, he saw a long, white cloth dangling behind the trees, only 3 meters away. He froze, trying to calm himself by not looking back until his bottle was full. When he finally dared to look again, the figure had vanished without a trace. Tensions rose as they began cooking. The sound of a woman clearing her throat reached Elias's ears. The voice was so close, but when he asked the others, they all fell silent, pretending not to hear. In their volatile mood, Elias and Nathan briefly argued over the sharpness of the kitchen knife. "Then, if you don't believe me, cut my ear with this knife," Elias challenged. "Oh, don't do that. You'll end up crying," Nathan jokingly replied, mere seconds after those words were spoken. The knife, which had previously been considered blunt, sliced Nathan's hand, drawing blood. Lucien and Caleb immediately reprimanded him. "That's why you shouldn't speak carelessly on the mountain." On the mountain, words are prayers that are instantly answered by invisible spirits. The night at the first post was restless for Elias. He experienced a time distortion. He felt like he'd woken up at 3 a.m. and was about to wake his friends for the summit. However, when Caleb awoke, the clock still read 12 a.m. Elias felt as if he'd been pulled into a different dimension while he slept. The journey to the summit was made in a dense fog storm. The atmosphere was tense. Thick fog obscured vision, and strong winds howled. Along the way, Elias was constantly followed by thousands of large mountain flies. The flies swarmed around him, as if there was something rotten or chosen about him. Despite the perfume he'd sprayed on, the flies remained loyal to him all the way to the summit. After reaching the summit and descending, physical obstacles began to confront them. Nathan's shoes, which were too small, hurt his feet, and Caleb's knees began to ache. However, the biggest obstacle came when they tried to descend back to the first post. The path they were on seemed to shift. They were mysteriously directed toward Devil's Climb, a path climbers often avoid during bad weather. "Why are we going this way again? This isn't the path we should be taking," Nathan shouted in panic. They were forced to turn back, climbing again in their already shattered physical condition to find the correct path. It was here that Elias began to sense that they were no longer climbing alone. Something was leading them around in a mysterious labyrinth. The culmination of all the terror came as they were on their way down to base camp. Feeling the strongest, Elias had walked far ahead, leaving Nathan and Caleb behind. At that moment, the sky, which should have been still afternoon, suddenly turned pitch black, like midnight, in a matter of seconds. Elias sat limply on a large rock, exhausted. As he turned toward the bushes, he saw a man wearing a short-sleeved shirt, like a local, standing with his back to him. Elias watched him intently, hoping it was another climber he could talk to. However, as the figure slowly turned toward Elias, his heart stopped. The figure had no face. It was just a blank, flat face, devoid of eyes, nose, or mouth. Elias froze in utter terror. He felt his world go dark, and he lost all sense of reality. Unbeknownst to him, he was discovered by Nathan and Caleb, lost in thought on a rock. Elias appeared dazed, with a terrifying, blank stare. When Caleb patted him on the shoulder, Elias realized that it was actually still afternoon and brightly lit. "It was already dark then. It was so dark," Elias shouted, his face ashen. "What's so dark? It's only 5 in the afternoon," Nathan replied, astonished. From that moment on, Elias was no longer himself. He walked like a robot, pale, and constantly looking behind him. Little did he know that the woman's whisper at the first post was a promise to meet, and the real meeting would take place at the most sacred location on the trail, the Blue Lake. The journey continued in a light drizzle. This is where their sense of smell began to be assaulted, a pungent, putrid odor, like a combination of a dead rat that had been rotting for weeks, and the stench of blood suddenly filled the air. The stench was so strong that it made Elias nauseous and nearly vomit. "Can you smell this?" Elias asked, covering his nose. Nathan remained silent, his face tense. He knew that in the mountains, confirming strange odors would only intensify the disturbance. Not only the smell, but the visual disturbances became even more pronounced. Between the trees, Elias repeatedly saw a long, dangling white cloth. This figure was different from the one at the first post. This time, the cloth seemed to fly, moving from one tree to another, following the rhythm of their footsteps. Elias, unable to bear the sight of the apparition any longer, finally made an unreasonable request. "Then, if I close my eyes, please guide me. I don't want to see anything else." And so the strange sight occurred. An adult man walking with his eyes closed on a slippery, steep climbing path, led by his friend, while behind them, something white continued to lurk from behind the fog. The tension reached its peak as they passed a large tree whose branches obscured the path. Elias, who had been opening his eyes occasionally to check his steps, suddenly stopped. He stared up at the tree, his eyes wide. At first, he thought it was just an ordinary tree trunk. However, as he looked closer, he saw that the trunk was covered in thick black hair and large claws gripping the branches. It wasn't a tree. It was a pair of giant feet standing above them. The figure's body towered above the tree canopy, disappearing into the darkness of the sky. The three of them ran, ignoring the pain in their legs and knees. As they ran, they realized that Lucien, who should have been nearby, was nowhere to be seen. They felt like they were running in a room with no exit. Approaching the Blue Lake area, the atmosphere suddenly became very cold, yet claustrophobic. Elias felt like he had entered a crowded market. Even though there were only the three of them there, he felt like he was being jostled by invisible people. His breathing was labored, and his chest felt as if it were being crushed by a heavy weight. Just as they reached the edge of the Blue Lake, the woman's voice they had heard at the first post returned. This time, it wasn't just a clearing of breath, but a very clear sentence, echoing in Elias and Caleb's heads.
He said he wanted to hang out. We've arrived at Blue Lake. Let's hang out.
The voice sounded so sweet yet deadly. That very moment, Elias vomited violently. He felt like he was expelling something more than just food scraps. His body went limp, and he fell to his knees on the wet ground. The strong scent of incense and frankincense suddenly filled the air, overshadowing the putrid stench that had followed them. "Forgive me, if I've done something wrong here," Elias sobbed through his nausea. He felt his end near the edge of the lake. The Blue Lake, usually a beautiful sight for climbers, that night looked like a black hole, ready to swallow anyone who had been promised to stay. In the midst of their despair, they finally saw a permanent wooden structure. There, Lucien sat calmly, as if nothing had happened. Lucien was sipping coffee at a seemingly unremarkable food stall. "Wow, you just got here? You've been up there for ages," Lucien greeted casually, a stark contrast to the disheveled, pale, and trembling faces of Elias, Nathan, and Caleb. Nathan immediately protested. "Where have you been? We were almost scared to death up there. You were there first?" Lucien frowned. "What? I've been waiting for Elias. He was right behind me the whole way down." Elias's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I've been with Nathan and Caleb. We saw the flat-faced figure with giant feet, and we ran together." Elias's voice rose. Lucien shook his head slowly. "Elias, you've been right behind the cave. We've been chatting the whole way. You even asked the cave about the Blue Lake when we passed by." Elias answered, in a flurry of words. If the real Elias was with Nathan and Caleb experiencing great terror, then who was the Elias walking and reaching out to Lucien all the way down? "Okay, let's not discuss it here. Let's go down to the parking lot now," Caleb replied. The journey from the last checkpoint to the parking lot usually only takes a short time. But for them, the path seemed to stretch for kilometers. Caleb began to feel a chill, shivering in the air that wasn't actually that cold. As they neared the asphalt road, a very cool breeze, not a piercing mountain breeze, hit Elias's face. The breeze carried the soft scent of jasmine, as if bidding farewell. "It feels so good then. It's like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders," Elias whispered. However, the relief was short-lived. When they reached the car and the cabin lights were turned on, Nathan stared at Elias in horror. Elias's face was no longer pale, but rather dull, with deep dark circles under his eyes, just like someone who had just returned from another world. "And we're going home now. No one is to look back again," Caleb said firmly, starting the car. As the car began to move out of the parking lot, Elias dared to glance in the rearview mirror. Under the dim streetlight, he saw the same white cloth figure standing still on the side of the road, as if waving at him. The car's engine roared through the road to Ashbourne. Inside, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the laughter-filled departure. No one dared turn on the music. No one dared start a conversation. Elias curled up in the back seat, his still damp hiking jacket wrapped around him. For Elias, this first climb was his last. Days after returning home, he still frequently smelled the sudden scent of dead rats in his room. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back at the edge of the blue lake, feeling the pressure of thousands of invisible people that made it difficult to breathe. Nathan was the same. The knife wound on his finger left a strange, irregular pattern of scars, as if a permanent reminder that on the mountain, one must guard one's words more than one's footsteps. Lucien could only offer one final message. The mountain never intends to kill you, but it will reflect what's in your heart. If you come with arrogance, it will show you how small you are.